Chapter 9. Peter. A nurse wearing bright purple cloud scrubs walked into Peter's room to adjust his IV solution and take his vitals. In a lighter sleep, Peter was aware of her presence and the cold fluid she pushed through the IV into his vein. He was alone in the room as his parents left to order dinner. He tried to open his eyes to see the nurse, but couldn't. He was just so tired. He had vaguely heard his parents talk about the trouble he had experienced in school. Those were hard memories for him to relive. Drifting deeper now and letting sleep win, his dreams led him into a replay of a childhood memory he would never forget. The night of his kindergarten Christmas concert quickly arrived. Ecstatic for his performance, Peter wanted to wear his Sunday clothes to sing his solo. Thomas dropped Peter off at the school 30 minutes early for voice warm-ups and line-up with his class. Meanwhile, Anne wrestled with the clock back home to get 4 kids out the door on time. She made it, barely. It was time to start the concert, and all the kids had to line up, so when they walked onto stage, they were arranged by height. Peter could feel his nerves tighten in his stomach and bladder. He quickly raised his hand, but blurted out his question before his classroom teacher, Mrs. Larth, could call on him.
"Can I go to the bathroom?"
"No, Peter, you just had a break before we started the lineup. It's time to start the show. Look, Mrs. Polly's already taking the first groups of kids to the gym." She pointed to the kids leaving the room.
"No, I have to go."
Peter wiggled his lower body. "You'll have to wait." Mrs. Larth had no sympathy for Peter. Mrs. Polly motioned for Peter's group of kids to come on stage. It was the last group, and they were to stand in the front row.
"I could ask Mrs. Polly, but she's over there. I guess I can hold it for a while."
Peter walked in line onto the stage and located his family. They were sitting in the back because they had the baby. Once he was on stage looking out at everyone, he was so excited he forgot he needed to use the restroom. Mrs. Polly came up to the microphone and introduced herself before announcing the first couple of songs. All the kids sang loudly.
"I love singing,"
Peter thought. The time went fast, and then it was time for Peter's solo. Mrs. Polly came to the microphone first and said, "Tonight we have a special treat. We are going to hear one of my favorite Christmas carols, Away in the Manger, performed by our feature soloist tonight, Peter Arnold, son of Thomas and Anne Arnold. Please help me welcome Peter." She began to clap, waiting for Peter to come to the microphone. Peter's stomach was in a knot.
"I'm ready."
Looking at his mom, her eyes were glued to his, and neither one of them broke eye contact. Peter walked to the microphone, waiting for the piano to begin. The room was silent for what seemed like an eternity. His palms were sweating.
"Even my brothers are watching me. I'm going to be great."
Mrs. Polly played the introduction on the piano, and then nodded her head when it was Peter's cue to come in. Peter opened his mouth, and perfectly on cue and in pitch, he sang his solo. With each word, his nervousness went away a little more. His muscles loosened. He could feel that it sounded right. His mom was glowing. Peter never felt more special.
"I love this. My mom's so happy with me."
When his short solo ended, something happened he never expected. Everyone got off their chairs, stood up, and clapped loudly. He even heard his brothers call out, "Way to go, Peter!" Peter was speechless. He looked to Mrs. Polly. She stood facing him. She held one arm across her waist and the other behind her to fake a bow, trying to get Peter to take one. Giggling, he imitated her and bowed all the way down. Some parents laughed because it was so cute, but most clapped harder.
"They liked it. They liked me."
Peter felt like he had found his place. He wanted to stand forever in this magical moment.
People are never this nice to me. Even my mean old teacher, Mrs. Larth, is smiling and clapping.
He must have stood at the microphone a few minutes too long because Mrs. Polly started to nod for him to return. Peter sighed with relief and turned to go back to his spot. He didn't even know he had been holding in all that air. It was like the last little bit of nerves were getting released as he walked back to his spot, and then something terrible started happening.
It's happening, and I can't stop it.
He looked to the door to see if he could run, but it was too far.
Oh, God, please don't let me do this now.
The more he tried holding it, the harder it came.
I'm peeing my pants. Oh, no.
Tears filled his eyes, but didn't dare fall. His whole body shook. He reached his spot, but stayed facing the wall.
I can't turn around.
Mrs. Polly walked right up to the stage and whispered,
Peter, turn around.
Peter stood with his feet glued to the stage, viciously shaking his head back and forth. Mrs. Polly could hear him quietly crying,
No, 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 no.
Peter, turn around, she called again. Now every last set of eyes in the room was directly focused on Peter.
I gotta get off the stage. The door's all the way on the other side of the room, and I have to face everyone to go that way. There's no other way. Why now?
He slowly started to turn to see his exit, and then once he saw it, he darted off the side of the stage as best he could for a kid wearing leg braces. With only a few feet away, Mrs. Polly saw Peter run off the stage. She was also the first to see his tear-streaked cheeks, his red ears, and the stain down his pants. Her heart sank. She just let him go. Anne saw the whole thing as well. When she saw Peter start to run off the stage, she could see the tears, and she could also see why. With her stomach in her throat, she got out of her chair and started to weave through the audience to meet Peter at the door. Whispers buzzed all over the room. Lots of the younger kids were laughing. With tunnel vision, Anne ran to her baby.
Shut up, you idiots! He has an undeveloped urinary system,
Anne muttered as she squeezed past a group of 3 boys laughing hysterically. She elbowed one of the boys in the back of the head.
It may or may not have been an accident that your fat head was in my way,
Anne whispered. Peter ran straight ahead, even though he could barely see through his tears. He could see someone blocking the doorway. As he got closer, he saw his mom, his sweet mom, who just a moment ago beamed with so much pride. He flew into her arms, and she scooped him up. Peter begged her through his sobs.
Mama, make me invisible, please.
Anne reached into her purse with a trembling hand to pull out her aviator sunglasses and put them on Peter. She held him to her chest. She blinked back tears, cleared her throat, and in a squeaky mouse whisper, she sang directly into his ear. Make me invisible, I don't want to see this man behind me staring at me. Lord, can you help me be brave? Lord, I need you, I need to be saved. As Anne sang, she walked out the back of the gym. Mrs. Polly restarted the concert, and a cheery, "Grandma got ran over by a reindeer," rang out. As Anne walked down the hall towards the front exit, Peter's cries softened to whimpers. His face felt hot.
I want to die,
he thought. Anne carried Peter to the van, humming her song softly on his cheek. Neither Anne nor Peter said anything in the van. Peter sat in back, being invisible with the sunglasses on, while the radio played an instrumental version of "Mary, Did You Know?" Looking through the window, they watched as the first tiny white snowflakes of the season fell poetically onto the ground.
I don't ever want to go to this school again. I hate it. It makes my tummy hurt.
After about 10 minutes of watching the snow, the rest of the family piled into the van. Thomas opened the side door to lock Shiloh's car seat in place. He saw Peter sitting in the back with Anne's sunglasses on. He knew the game he was playing. "Where's Peter?" he asked Anne. "He left after the concert. He's probably at home right now." Anne winked at Thomas. "Well, we better get back. I'm going to have taco pizza delivered to the house. I don't want him to eat it all," Thomas said with a grin.
"I'm not hungry. Don't talk to me," Peter thought. Today was the best moment of my life, and the worst.
Chapter 10. Anne. After soiling himself at his concert in the most horrid night of his life, Peter had disappeared into his room. When the pizza arrived and the rest of the family dug in, Anne asked Thomas to set 2 pieces aside for Peter because she was busy nursing Shiloh. Thomas quickly complied with her request, grabbing a 3rd piece for Anne. "Life with 5 kids means I always have to be multitasking, and I pretty much never get warm food," Anne sighed as she longingly smelled the out-of-reach pizza. When Anne was able to make it into the kitchen, she picked up the piles of greasy napkins that the family had left at the table and threw the empty pizza boxes in the overstuffed trash. Anne had previously picked up a movie, The Lion King, to watch now as part of the concert post-party celebration. But nobody was celebrating. Thomas offered to take Shiloh back to their room to put him down for bed. Anne managed to get all the kids, except Peter, into the family room. She passed out blankets and pillows to commence movie night. Once the kids were all engrossed in the movie, she snuck out. She had to see Peter. She grabbed his pizza and extra taco sauce packets. As she walked, she pulled off the bigger chunks of lettuce from his pizza, as those always made Peter gag. She hid the diced tomatoes under the Doritos, which he loved. Anything to get this kid to eat a vegetable. His door was closed, but not all the way. She could see a sliver of light coming from the narrow crack. Anne approached it, pressing her face up against the opening. Peter had changed into his green Ninja Turtle pajamas, but he still had her sunglasses of invisibility on. He was looking at some picture books. Anne gently knocked on the door and stuck her head in, pretending to be looking for Peter. "Peter, are you in here?" "Peter, the light is on, but I can't see you." That's funny. I thought he would be in here." Peter laughed, grabbed his sunglasses, and took them off. "Here I am, Mom." Anne's heart lifted. One thing about Peter, he never stayed mad, or sad, or any emotion for very long. "I have taco pizza." Anne slipped through the doorway, carrying the plate in front of her. Peter's eyes popped wide open as he reached for it. "Taco pizza, yum." Anne sat on the bed with her arm around her son as he ate his pizza. He chewed quickly, with purpose. After his last bite, he set his plate on his nightstand, crawled up onto Anne's lap, and placed his head under her chin. Anne grabbed his hand and began kneading his finger joints to help them relax. In a small voice, Peter asked, "Mama, what's wrong with me?" Anne inhaled deeply. "Honey, nothing's wrong with you. You are the way God made you. Perfect for you." "No, Mama, none of the other kids pee their pants all the time." "Well, Peter, you were born a little too early." "Like Shiloh?" "Well, no, not like Shiloh. Shiloh was a little early, but he was ready to come out. You weren't ready to come out. You were what is called premature. You were such a miracle baby, so little, and your body didn't have enough time to grow. You had to do a lot of catching up after you were born. You know how you have to wear your braces to help you walk?" "Yeah." Peter nodded.
No one else has those either.
Well, no one you know, but some kids in other places wear them too. They straighten and hold up your legs because they can't be strong on their own. Your bladder is also like that. It's a little behind because it didn't get enough time to grow before you were born. Even though you can't see it, it's a muscle, like the ones in your legs. It just needs a little more help than most people's. Anne grabbed a bottle of emu oil on Peter's nightstand and dabbed out a dime-size amount into her right palm. She dipped her finger into it and rubbed it into Peter's joints. Peter sighed at the contact of the slow burn the oil created as it cooled his flesh, relieving some of the tightness.
I don't understand why I have to stick out. I just want to be like everyone else.
Honey, it's okay to be different. Hey, you know what? You reminded me of something. Do you know at Steep and Brew where they have that fish tank?
Yeah.
Do you know how it's full of plain rocks on the bottom, but there's that plastic ruby sitting on top?
Yeah.
That sticks out, doesn't it? Anne squeezed some more oil out into her palm to use on Peter's other hand. She replaced the bottle on the nightstand.
Yeah, I always see it.
Well, it sticks out because it's different than the other rocks. But since it sticks out, you can see how beautiful it is compared to all the other rocks. If it were in a tank of rubies, nobody would notice it. I think you're like that ruby in the water. You stick out because you're different. But your differences only make you shine brighter. Peter, it's not your fault what happened tonight.
I know. I asked to go to the bathroom, but my teacher wouldn't let me.
Peter let out a groan in frustration. What? When?
Before we got on stage, my tummy got nervous again. I asked to go, but she said no.
Who said no?
Mrs. Larth. I don't know why she doesn't change her name to Mrs. Barf. I really don't like her.
The pressure in Anne's head began to build, and she could feel her ears getting warm. This school has got to be the least sympathetic place, as they won't even let a 5-year-old with a kidney condition go to the bathroom. Then it leads to the most embarrassing incident of his life. Anne's mind raced. Peter, I'll call the school first thing Monday. Anne sat planning what she was going to tell Mrs. Krieg while Peter leaned onto his mom's shoulder and fell asleep. Anne wasn't surprised, as Peter always fell asleep best when he was lying on someone. It was a very high-need quality for him to have, but it was so sweet, too. Anne listened for his breath to get heavy, rolled him off of her, and tucked him into bed. She swept his hair out of his face, kissed his cheek, and stole one more look as she left the room. He looked like an angel. Anne peeked into the family room to see if the movie was still playing. The kids were miraculously behaving. Then she went searching for Thomas and Shiloh, finding them both asleep in her room. Thomas was reclined with Shiloh on his chest. Anne crawled in bed next to them both. Thomas opened one eye. "How's the soloist?" "Sad. He asked me what's wrong with him and why the other kids don't pee in their pants." Thomas raised an eyebrow at Anne to continue. "I told him it was because he was born too soon." "What did he say?" "Nothing, really. He fell asleep." "Isn't there something more we can do for him? What about that urologist at Rochester who he saw before? Maybe now, since Peter is older, there's something." Thomas let out a heavy sigh. "Anne, he's lucky he has a urinary system. You saw the way he was born. We're so blessed he's even alive." What about an acupuncturist? Someone was telling me that they did needles on top of the head and it cured a leaky bladder right up. Anne, nothing short of a kidney transplant is going to help that kid, Thomas said as he stared blankly into Anne's eyes. I just won't accept that there's nothing we can do. Anne started to cry. It's so hard to watch him go through these trials. He's been through so much in his little life. Thomas used his free arm to pull Anne into his chest. She rested her face next to Shiloh. The smell of Shiloh's coconut baby powder tickled her nose, creating a moment of serenity that stopped her tears as Anne dreamed of a beach somewhere. After a few minutes, Anne gained her composure. I better make the rest of the kids go to bed. I want to finish planning the baptism tonight yet, too. Anne got up to finish her night duties. Chapter 11. Thomas. Pizza's here, Shiloh called as he carried a stack of 3 pizza boxes into Peter's hospital room. Tane followed him. Paul hurried into the room a few seconds behind Tane, with Macy and Johnny in tow. Thomas took the pizza boxes and set them on the rolling food tray in the room. He dished up paper plates and passed them out. Anne reached out and grabbed Macy, pulling the pig-tailed girl onto her own lap. I miss you. Are you both behaving at Auntie's? She asked as she ruffled Johnny's hair. Johnny was the kid in the family who didn't match any other member, including his twin. His hair was white, his eyes were green, and his personality was that of a little mathematician, even at 6 years old. Johnny squirmed. Yes, you know what, Mom? What? I'm the chubby bunny champ. I got 47 marshmallows in my mouth. He flexed his bicep muscles to prove he was a champion. Macy butted in. Yeah, but then the marshmallows exploded all over. Does that count? She turned to her dad. Thomas laughed. Yeah, yeah, it counts. That's how you celebrate getting all those marshmallows stuffed in your mouth. He looked at Johnny. You wait until I can challenge you. I'm the ultimate champion. By now, both twins had noticed their older brother lying in bed. Is he sleeping? Johnny whispered. Sort of, Thomas said. Does it scare you? No, he looks like he's sleeping, Johnny said as he shrugged his shoulders. Well, then you can think of it like that, Thomas replied. Macy pulled something out of a red backpack no one had noticed she had even been holding. I made something for him. She held up an orange paper plate with a hole cut out of the center. It's a wreath. It's orange because it's his favorite color. Auntie helped me write, I love you, Peter. Thomas took the wreath from Macy and hung it from the knob in the IV pole next to Peter's bed. It's beautiful. He'll love it. Thomas could not look at any wreath, even a paper plate one, without being reminded of a very special day a long time ago, Shiloh's baptism. It was well over a decade ago when Shiloh's baptism Sunday was celebrated. After the ceremony was over, the kids, except for Peter, played in the churchyard, waiting for the adults to get done visiting. Peter was too timid to go outside, with the goat woman's house looming over the playground. Outside the church, tables were set up with Christmas wreaths for sale. Thomas walked up to Father Raymond to inquire about the wreaths. Where did you get all the wreaths? Sister Sarah makes them. We cut the branches from the pine trees out back. She needs money to support her mission here, and this is a new project we came up with. So when you were out running around the hills the other night when you saw my boys, you were out doing this stuff? Sort of. I wear many hats. Father laughed nervously. Is this a new mission, or is it still to help fund the medical mission I used to volunteer for? Thomas asked. A little of both, Father said. Well, we'd better buy one since these wreaths helped bring my boys home. Thomas pulled out his wallet. Maybe I can just get all my Christmas shopping done. He pulled out 2 crisp bills from his wallet. Kids, come over here and pick out some wreaths, Thomas called to the kids outside. They listened out of pure curiosity. And then they came in. Thomas looked around for Peter and found him in the front of the church, sitting down at the piano, staring at the keys. Peter, Thomas called over to him, would you like to pick one out too? Peter smiled, got up, and limped over to the table. Is your leg brace bothering you? Thomas asked with his eyebrows furrowed.
Yeah, it feels a little tight.
Here, let me look at it. Yep, I think you must have grown again. Thomas adjusted the width for the metal cross strap. Try that. Peter stood up straighter.
That's better. Thanks, Dad.
No problem. Which wreath do you want? We will keep 2 for our doors at home, and we can give the other ones to Grandma Arnold and Grandma Jean. Peter picked the one with holly berries and a giant red bow. By now, Anne, with Shiloh in his car seat, had joined them by the table, and they were bundled up in their coats, ready to go. All right, family, I have pot stickers in the crock pot at home. Are you all ready? Anne asked.
Can I sing my solo?
Peter asked from behind the table. He was smiling, and Thomas thought, why not have a redo with just the family here to listen? It might be nice to have a positive ending. Sure, Thomas said. Anne led Peter's siblings to sit up front by the piano. Peter sat on the bench and flexed his fingers. He struck a chord and effortlessly played and sung his solo. He finished with the biggest smile on his face.
It was good, wasn't it? He asked.
Everyone clapped as they wanted him to feel special. Peter stepped down from the piano bench and took a huge bow. Anne raised her eyebrows. How do you know how to play it on the piano? Did Mrs. Polly teach you that? Peter shook his head.
No, I just picked out the keys. You can hear the sounds if you listen.
Yeah, but you still have to practice. People don't just play the piano. Thomas questioned as he looked at his son.
I guess I do,
Peter answered boldly, with confidence. Anne and Thomas exchanged glances. I think he picked that up from Mrs. Polly, Thomas whispered to Anne, who nodded. They shrugged their shoulders, gathered the kids, and the 4 huge Christmas wreaths Thomas just shelled out $200 to buy, and headed to the van. Once inside the van, Peter was fidgety while waiting for Thomas to secure Shiloh in his car seat. Peter, can you please sit down?
Dad, I don't want to sit in this seat. I don't like this window. I can see her.
Peter's face twisted into a pre-crying tantrum. Thomas turned to look. The house on the hill invited his gaze. The house door was ajar, and a woman was standing on the bottom porch step. Dressed in a gray robe, she was holding 2 wooden boxes. She was calling out to someone. Thomas looked down the hill and saw Father Raymond walking towards her, carrying a shovel. The woman and father talked briefly on the porch, and then went inside the house. Thomas blew it off as he turned back to Peter, who he saw exhale when the house door was closed. Just sit still. She's gone now, Thomas said to ease Peter's anxiety. Peter put his head down and sucked in his lip to prevent it from quivering while he waited for his dad to drive away. Chapter 12. Anne. After dinner at the hospital, Anne was left alone at Peter's bedside. Anne flipped through the TV channels, but the only thing that remotely piqued her interest was a rerun of The Golden Girls. After watching it for a moment, she realized her favorite character, Sophia, wasn't in this one, so she shut it off. The room was dark now, except for the nightlight above the bed. Anne curled her legs under as best she could in the small chair. She leaned all the way over against the wall, resting her head on a pillow she had made from her sweatshirt. Closing her tired eyes, Anne drifted to sleep. A beeping noise sounded. Anne's eyes darted to Peter's monitor. She was just about to jump up and press the nurse's call light when she recognized the beep as her cell phone. It was a text from Mrs. Polly. Anne had stayed friends with her after all the years Mrs. Polly taught her kids. She wanted an update, and Anne was disappointed she couldn't give her better news. Mrs. Polly's reply text surprised Anne. It read, "Exa's beside herself. Have you talked to her?" Anne didn't know what to say because so much had happened lately with Exa. Surprised why Mrs. Polly would know to ask, it took Anne a while to remember Mrs. Polly was the reason she even met Exa all those years ago. It had been a Monday morning after the disastrous Christmas concert, and it was a short school week because of the upcoming holiday. Insanity to find her mourning, trying to get 4 kids ready for school, plus nursing a baby. Peter was nowhere to be found at the breakfast table. Anne laid out the cereal boxes and a plate of toast for the kids, and with the baby in a sling, she ran down the hall. "Peter, breakfast!" No answer. She popped her head into his room to see him still in his pajamas. The clothes they had laid out together the night before, to be worn today, were jumbled up on top of the dresser. "Mama, look at my hands!" He held up both hands. Each one was knotted into a fist except for his thumbs. Anne held her hand out to usher him over. "Come here. It'll be faster to just run them under warm water." Peter walked with her to the bathroom and held his fists under the water faucet as it streamed water, almost too hot to touch. Anne leaned over the faucet as best she could with Shiloh in his baby sling. Being careful not to get Shiloh wet, Anne massaged Peter's fingers one by one, starting at the tip and twisting her fingers along the length of each one until she got to the knuckle. She paid extra attention to the inside of each joint, rubbing it with her thumb until she felt a release. After she was done, she wrapped his fingers in a white hand towel to dry. "All right now, go get dressed." Anne saw in his face a look of determination she knew all too well. His lips were perched out in a way that resembled a beak, and he folded his arms across his chest. Shiloh simultaneously fussed, and she could smell why. In the background, she heard a fight breaking out at the breakfast table. "Everyone's going to laugh at me," Peter said as he looked to Anne with huge, sad eyes. "It was a long weekend. I'm sure everyone has forgotten already." Anne swayed her hips back and forth, trying to soothe Shiloh. Shiloh's fussing escalated into a scream, and she knew it was pointless to try to hold a conversation. Peter looked devastated. Anne tried to bounce Shiloh in the carrier, but he screamed louder. "I want to stay home with you and Shiloh, Mom!" Peter hollered over the screaming. Anne sighed and tried adjusting Shiloh. "One more day. You can stay home one more day. I have to change Shiloh before we can load him up in the car seat. Will you get dressed and grab whatever breakfast you can find? I can tell the school that you're not feeling well." It's not a total lie because he isn't feeling well, even though it's emotional and not physical. I don't know what else to do. There's a war going on in my kitchen, and I can smell a war going on in Shiloh's diaper. The roads are icy, so travel will be slow. I don't have time to fight to get Peter to school, only to have to go get him in an hour after he gets kicked out of class. Again. Peter's face lit up. "Yes, Mom," he said as he got up to dress. Anne raced across the hall to change Shiloh, and then hurried into the kitchen. Tiny colored marshmallows and cereal loops were scattered over the floor. Tane and Paul were not in the room. Marie was trying to sweep the cereal off the floor. "Where are your brothers?" "They went to the car already. Mom, school started 5 minutes ago." Marie adjusted her glasses on her nose as she informed Anne. Anne looked to the clock to confirm what she already knew. "Okay, can you get in the car? Here are my keys. Start it up so it will get warm. I'll be out in 2 minutes. I have to find my shoes. Peter, get your coat on."
"Mom, I never ate breakfast,"
Peter whined. "We'll have to grab something on the way back from school." Anne made up a solution without even really thinking about what was coming out of her mouth.
"Steep and brew?"
Peter asked. "Sure."
"What? Peter's not going to school? Why?"
Marie asked. "Marie, listen. Get in the car. Don't talk about it. Peter's not feeling well." Anne fumbled for words.
"Are you kidding? He looks fine to me. I don't want to go to school. Can I go to Steep and Brew?"
Anne grabbed the broom from Marie and whispered in a disciplinary tone just inches in front of Marie's face. "Marie, you're my big girl. You have to listen to me, please. Don't tell your brothers. Just get your stuff on and get in the car." Marie sucked in her lip, grabbed the keys, her coat and book bag, and went outside. Anne threw the broom against the wall and ran around, getting the last of the stuff for Shiloh and Peter. "I still have my nightgown on," she thought as she looked down. She pulled on her boots anyway. "If I put my coat over the top, no one will notice," she convinced herself. Anne dropped the kids off at school and headed home.
"Mom, Steep and Brew,"
Peter urgently reminded Anne when she didn't turn at the stop because she was headed home. Anne remembered, but she couldn't believe she agreed to go there. She just said that to get Peter in the car. "Peter, I'm in my pajamas. I can't go to Steep and Brew right now. Can we go for lunch?"
"Mom, but I want to. And you said Steep and Brew. You said on the way home."
Peter's voice was coming out in high-pitched shrieks. Shiloh fussed as he picked up on the tone of the conversation. Anne looked in the mirror and fluffed her hair. "I don't even have an ounce of makeup on right now." "I did say that. All right, we'll go in and order drinks and a muffin, but we'll take our stuff to go."
"Okay,"
Peter grinned. By the time they arrived, Shiloh had fallen asleep, tucked in with his elephant print fleece blanket. Peter announced he had to go to the bathroom and made his way there. Anne ordered drinks and 2 pumpkin muffins. While she waited, a familiar face popped in the door.
"Mrs. Polly,"
Peter called as he ran his stiff, legs-with-braces run out of the bathroom.
"How come you're not at school?"
"I should ask you the same question," Mrs. Polly said as she waved towards Anne, who had turned her head to join in the conversation.
"I'm not feeling well today,"
Peter announced with a smile. Mrs. Polly laughed and looked back at Anne. "We had a rough morning, and he was nervous, so I told him he could stay home 1 more day. He's still scared to face the kids," Anne whispered as she covered her mouth, pretending to bite her nail. They called Anne's order for pickup, and she motioned for Peter to go get it. While he was gone, the 2 ladies talked openly about the accident. "I am so sorry about that," Mrs. Polly apologized. "My heart broke. Is he okay?" "No, we've been busy, so we don't have too much time to talk about it, but he's been upset. He has had nightmares, and it was a long weekend." Anne's eyes flashed layers of deep exhaustion. "I just don't know what to do. I mean, emotionally, he's crushed, but physically, something must be done. He can't go through life like this. I asked Thomas about getting another evaluation with a urologist, but he said nothing could be done except a kidney transplant. That's more of a last resort, so we're stuck in this incredibly embarrassing stage, hoping as he grows, he'll get stronger. He did such a great job. I was really hoping this would be good for his self-esteem," Mrs. Polly added. "Hey, can I ask you something while Peter is over there?" Anne leaned in close. Mrs. Polly nodded. Peter wanted to sing his solo again yesterday for us at church, and well, he went to the piano and he played it on the keys. Did you teach him that?" Mrs. Polly's face lit up as she waved her hand in excitement. "No, I tried to tell you this when I asked you who taught him piano. He keeps saying he taught himself, but he plays perfectly. He's in my room several times a week. He hears a song, and then he plays it. He doesn't read the sheet music. The kid plays by ear." Anne scratched her head. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, he's a talent. I know other people who play by ear, but usually they have some level of training. When I was in college, one of my roommates could play by ear like that. It was amazing. It's sort of weird, though, to think about that now because I'm meeting her here for coffee." Anne saw Peter was heading back with their order. "So, why are you not at school?" Anne asked Mrs. Polly to change the subject. "Not feeling well?" "Actually, I'm taking a personal day. Well, half a day, as I'm taking first and second period off. I usually have my second and third graders this morning, but their teachers wanted to get them together to go to the dinosaur exhibit downtown at the museum this morning, so I have some free time." "What? A field trip? I didn't know about that. That would be Paul and Tane's classes, but they never said. Oh, shoot. I didn't even talk to either of them this morning, though, because they'd gone out to the car and Shiloh screamed most of the way to the school. Yeah, they had buses taking them over there for a tour this morning," Mrs. Polly added. "Thomas had the boys. Thomas was driving the boys last week because I was just home from the hospital. Maybe he knew about it," Anne asked out loud, but more to herself as she worried. "Oh, here she is!" Mrs. Polly squealed in excitement as she ran to hug a lady who had just walked in. "I grabbed us a table in the corner. I was just chatting with some friends. Here, you have to meet one of my students first," Mrs. Polly exclaimed as she grabbed the lady by the arm and ushered her over to Peter and Anne. "Peter, this is my friend Exa. Exa, this is Peter, my star student, and his mother, Anne. Peter plays the piano by ear like you. I was just telling his mom how you were another person I knew that could do that." Mrs. Polly was beaming when she talked about Peter to Exa. Exa perked up and looked over to Peter. She met his eyes, and he stared back at her. Anne watched Peter's expression as he stared at Exa, and when their eyes met, Peter's eyes twinkled, like he'd recognized something he had lost. Exa was tall for a woman, maybe 5 feet 10 inches. She had long, black hair, parted in the middle. Bright blue eyes flashed behind long lashes that were outlined in heavy black eyeliner and mascara. Her nose was slightly bent, but she had a nice smile. She wore a black maxi dress with flared sleeves. Peter thought it resembled a witch's Halloween costume. "Hi, Peter. And Anne?" Exa spoke with an accent. Peter giggled because of the way she said his name. "Hi," Peter answered shyly as he hid behind his mom's coat. "Nice to meet you, Exa. I don't mean to be rude, but we have to go get the baby back home before he wakes up, and it's feeding time. You two enjoy your coffee," Anne said as she pushed Peter towards the door. She had remembered she was in her nightgown still and was embarrassed by meeting new people. They said their goodbyes, and Anne got the boys loaded back in the van. She located her cell phone on the passenger seat where she had left it. There were 4 missed calls. The school twice, and Thomas twice. She dialed the school. "Hi, Val, you called? This is Anne Arnold." "Yeah, we have 2 boys here in the office who couldn't go on their field trip this morning because they didn't have their slips filled out. Also, Peter never showed up to class today," Val reported in a monotone voice. "I have Peter. I was going to call. I forgot. He's sick. I didn't know about the field trip. Can I give you verbal permission over the phone?" "The buses are gone. They can hang out with me until their classes get back, I guess. You know, I should get paid for all this babysitting I do for your boys, Val joked, but Anne knew she didn't think it was funny. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I was recovering from my hospital stay last week, Anne offered, and then got off the phone to call Thomas. The school had called Thomas too, but he didn't have a clue as to what was going on. They talked for a few minutes as Anne drove. When they got home, Anne hung up the phone and grabbed sleeping Shiloh in his car seat. She reached her other hand out to Peter. His face was peaked. Honey, what's wrong? Mrs. Polly's friend, Peter said, and started to speak again, but then stopped again. Yeah. I know her, Peter said. Anne was a little surprised by how intense his gaze was, but she grabbed his hand and pulled him from the van. It was freezing, and she didn't want Shiloh to wake up. Yeah, we met her. She was nice, Anne said. Let's get in the house. Chapter 13. Anne. The night before school started, after Christmas break, Thomas worked late, volunteering at the free clinic. Anne ran around the house as normal, making sure the laundry was done and book bags were packed. She knew something was up with Peter when she stopped in his room to drop off his laundry basket. His book bag protruded from his garbage can. Peter, why is your book bag in your garbage when I asked you to get it ready and set it by the door for tomorrow? I'm not going, Peter stated boldly with his arms crossed over his chest, with his chin tucked down. Anne stepped forward towards him. Honey, I know I let you stay home before, but you have to go back to school tomorrow. You missed 3 days, and your teacher and friends are probably all worried about you. I don't have any friends, Peter said matter-of-factly, crushing Anne's heart. What about Mrs. Polly and music class? She touched his shoulder. Anne could see the wheels turning in Peter's head. What if she is gone having coffee again? No, she was only gone 1 day because her classes were canceled. She'll be there. How about you go back tomorrow so you can see her? And if it's bad, we can talk about doing something different. All right, Mom, Peter agreed without making eye contact. Anne was grateful Peter had a special bond with his music teacher. She gave his shoulder a squeeze and left the room. Battle won, but get ready for the war in the morning. The next morning went smoothly, as all the kids did as they were told. It was like a little heaven to Anne as she drove home from dropping them off. She was going to have 6 hours alone with Shiloh, and she couldn't have appreciated it more. Anne and Shiloh cuddled, napped, and picked up leftover Christmas decorations. Anne had just laid Shiloh down for his afternoon nap and was going to grab a shower when her phone rang. Her heart sank. She didn't even look at the caller ID. Val? Mrs. Arnold, how are you? What's wrong? Anne, I really tried not to call you, but things are so out of hand. You need to come get Peter. Now? I just put Shiloh down for a nap. I can't wake him. He'll be a total fussbutt. Anne blurted out. What's wrong with Peter? He won't go to his classroom. He refuses. He said he's only here to see Mrs. Polly, and he has been in her room all morning. Mrs. Polly tolerates it, but we can't run a school like this. Mrs. Krieg tried to physically remove him from the music room, and he freaked. He started kicking and biting her. If he's worried about kids teasing him, he does it to himself by acting out this way. Anne was silent, as she could visualize Peter doing that. I did tell him last night to go to school just to see Mrs. Polly. However, I didn't think he would take it literally and just hang out in her room all day. Was this my fault? Where is he now? He's in the music room. Anne, between you and I, Mrs. Krieg has had it. She's been on the phone all morning talking to the superintendent, trying to figure out what she can do. She wants to talk to you when you come. Can you give me an hour? Please? Val,
I just put Shiloh down, and if he doesn't nap for at least a half hour, my life is going to be unbearable. Please, Val. You have kids. You raised kids. Please, just stall for me.
Okay, 1 hour, Val agreed. Anne hung up the phone and checked the monitor. Shiloh was still sleeping. She had time to grab a shower and slip into something other than sweatpants. Something about not having showered in a day makes a person feel vulnerable and weak. She called Thomas to beg him to meet her at the school. He hesitated, but he agreed to let his physician assistant handle his appointments. After exactly 30 minutes, Anne woke up Shiloh to load him in his car seat. If I don't have trouble with traffic, I should get to the school 5 minutes early. Pulling into the visitors' parking lot in front of the school, she thought to herself, this spot should have my name on it already. Thomas was waiting by the front door. He was in a good mood, as always. She smiled internally as she watched him wave at her. Hi, sweetie, he called to her. His dark hair ruffled in the wind, indicating that he needed a haircut, but Anne loved it like that. Thomas grabbed Shiloh's car seat from Anne and took her hand in his free hand. He was her rock. I'm nervous, Anne said as the three of them walked into the office to await the meeting. Val was not in the office, but Mrs. Krieg's door was open. Anne peeked inside. There was no happy playing dinosaurs together on the floor with Peter going on today. Mrs. Krieg sat at her desk, with her arms crossed, and initiated a stare down by refusing to break eye contact with Anne. Arnold's, come in here, please. Thomas and Anne walked inside her office, closing the door behind them. Peter wasn't in the room. Silence deafened the room, except for the buzzing of a fan. Val informed you about the little circus we have going on today. Peter's camped out in the music room. Yeah, I'm sorry. He's just off because he had such a long break. I'll talk to him, Anne offered. Mrs. Arnold, your son assaulted me. He's delinquent in more areas than just academics. I talked to the school board and the superintendent. We are going to require Peter to get an evaluation by the school's consulting psychiatrist, Dr. Brown. Peter must be in compliance with any recommendations by Dr. Brown before he will be allowed back in this building, Mrs. Krieg stated without batting an eyelash. What? He can't come back? Anne asked. Peter's expelled until he has a behavior plan ready to be implemented with Dr. Brown's help, Mrs. Krieg restated. Here are his books. His teacher gave a summary of her lesson plans for the next couple weeks so he doesn't get behind. I called Dr. Brown's office, and he recommended it would take at least a couple weeks to get the full evaluation done, as he requires several visits. I can't teach him this. I have a new baby. Anne stared blankly at the books. Get a tutor, then. I can have Val email you a list of tutors in the district who we have worked with before. I've tried everything. My school cannot have this commotion any longer. This is not the place for it. Now, it's your turn to do something. He's not welcome back until Dr. Brown tells me directly he's okay to come back. Take his books. Go get Peter from Mrs. Polly's room. Arnie, the janitor, will escort you all out. Anne looked to Thomas to say something to change Mrs. Krieg's mind. This was the fastest, most direct meeting they had ever had, and they never got a word in. This was so wrong. Thomas reached for the books, wrapped his other arm around Anne, and said, I agree. This is not the place for Peter. We'll get our son. You don't have to make him your problem again. Thank you. Anne's jaw dropped, but then she stood up to follow Thomas. They walked across the hall to the music room. Through the window, they saw Mrs. Polly directing the class in singing The Farmer in the Dell. Peter was perched at the piano playing the song for class. He wore the biggest smile Anne had ever seen on him. She pointed her finger and glanced at Thomas. He's playing the piano. Arnie stepped forward to open the door, but Anne pushed her hand in front and pleaded, Wait, I have to see this. Anne stepped closer. Anne and Thomas observed Peter play the piano like it was an old friend. They saw this vibrant smile that was foreign to his face. The usually pale undertones in his face were rosy, and he looked exuberant. Anne whispered, "I never told you because I guess I forgot, but we ran into Mrs. Polly before Christmas break. She said, 'He plays by ear, and it's a rare talent.' I had a hard time believing it, but now I can see it. It's amazing. I can't believe he can even do that with his hands. It's like a miracle. Do you think we should let him? Won't it make it worse?" "I guess we'll just have to see," Thomas said. "I don't want to see him get more disappointed if it makes his hands hurt worse. I think if this is what he wants to do, then we should encourage it." Then, in a voice just above a whisper, Thomas said, "Peter's a miracle that no one will ever fully understand. This school is great for kids like Tane and Paul, who make friends easily and play sports. Anne, it's time we face it. Peter's drowning here. He rarely makes it through a whole day, and we spend more energy doing damage control. He's meant for something else," Thomas said, then pushed the door open and went inside to retrieve an all too eager to go home Peter. And just like that, Peter never set foot in a traditional classroom again.